Senator King.
Mr. Secretary, I'm somewhat puzzled. I grew up in Virginia where Robert E. Lee was revered. I think when I was a kid, his birthday was a school holiday. But as I grew older and learned more about American history, I learned that he fit the classic definition of a traitor. He took up arms against his country. He broke his oath as a member of the United States Army, which he took upon entering his career at West Point. Why are you going through these incredible gymnastics, finding current soldiers or other soldiers to rename? And you slipped a minute ago. You said we're returning these bases to their original names.
Here's the kind of moment that cuts through the noise, when a U.S. Senator actually calls out the absurdity of romanticizing traitors. Senator King isn't just asking why military bases named after Confederate leaders are being renamed. He's flipping the script on that whole nostalgic delusion. Let's get real. Robert E. Lee wasn't some misunderstood Southern hero. He was a U.S. Army officer who broke his oath, led an armed rebellion, and fought to preserve slavery. That's not heritage, it's treason. And yet, for decades, we've had bases honoring his name, training American soldiers under the shadow of a man who literally turned his back on the country. King's challenge isn't just about transparency in defense budgets, it's about moral clarity. Why are we still debating whether to stop glorifying enemies of the United States? This isn't erasing history, it's refusing to celebrate betrayal. And if that makes some people uncomfortable, maybe it should.
Robert E. Lee, leading general of the Confederacy, Pickett, the other names. Why are you doing this? I don't understand what the motivation is to rename bases for people who took up arms against their country on behalf of slavery. What possible motivation can there be for this? Who is telling you to do this? Who is urging you to do this?
Senator, the veterans and service members across the country who have deployed from Fort Bragg or Fort Benning or Fort Hood or Fort Pickett, there's a legacy, there's a connection to those bases and to those places, to what they trained for there, what they did for, and what they came home back to. That matters to them. Ask enough of them, as I do, all the time, before and later. And we recognize the service of those who were put into the replacement. No one's disputing that. I would never dispute that. What we're looking at is erasing history, erasing names, erasing base names that service members are tied to. Talk to people that serve at Bragg. Ask people that serve at Fort Bragg or Fort Benning.
Let's break this down, because Senator King just walked straight into the heart of a moral contradiction. He's grilling Pete Hegseth over the decision to rename military bases that still bear the names of Confederate generals and the defense, that it would erase history and disrupt some emotional connection soldiers have to those names. Really? We're talking about bases named after men who took up arms against the United States to defend slavery, and we're supposed to preserve that for the sake of tradition? That's not historical. It's historical gaslighting. Nobody's erasing the past. We're just determined to stop honoring traitors with taxpayer-funded monuments. If a name is the only thing anchoring someone's emotional bond to a base, maybe it's time to reflect on what that bond is really tied to. The military isn't just about loyalty, it's about values. And keeping Confederate names on federal property isn't honoring heritage. It's institutionalizing betrayal. And so what squares some nafisug?
If they like the fact that the names have been returned, and to a man and to a woman, they will tell you, thank God we're back to Fort Bragg, and thank God we're back. And thankfully, because so many men and women in this country have served, there's a Benning and a Bragg and a Pickett and a Hood has a Silver Star or a Medal of Honor that we could rename the base to because of the limits of what Congress allowed us to do. So this is something we've been proud to do, something that's important for the morale of the Army, and those communities appreciate that we've returned it back to what it was instead of trying to play this game of erasing names.
We're not erasing history, Mr. Secretary. We're recognizing history and recognizing that mistakes have been made in this country. The greatest of all was the Civil War, where people took up arms against their country on behalf of the institution of slavery. And to continue the practice of recognizing those people and honoring them by the naming of these bases is, I believe, an insult to the people of the United States. Let me talk about the budget.
Let us brace, and here's where the conversation gets raw and revealing. Soldiers at Fort Bragg and Fort Benning say they want the original names back, that it boosts morale and honors their history. But let's be brutally honest. What kind of history are we really honoring? These weren't just names. They were tributes to Confederate leaders who waged war against the United States to defend slavery. So when the U.S. Secretary of State is questioned for renaming these bases, the real issue isn't tradition. It's whose legacy we're choosing to elevate. The questioner hits the nerve dead on. Honoring Confederate generals isn't patriotism. It's a slap in the face to every American who still believes in liberty, equality, and the Union those Confederates tried to destroy. If morale hinges on names rooted in betrayal, maybe we need to redefine what kind of pride our military should stand for. This isn't erasing history. It's refusing to celebrate treason.
I don't understand why the budget is coming to us in two pieces. Why not give us an honest base budget instead of putting a piece of it in reconciliation? As I understand it, OMB is saying we're going to have a flat defense budget for the next 4 or 5 years. Are we planning reconciliation every year from now on? Why not give us an honest budget telling us what your priorities are, and then we can consider it. This committee always works in a bipartisan basis on the defense budget. We all want to see some increases in the defense budget. And yet you're giving us this this fake, here's a piece of the budget, here's another. You're cutting, in the base budget, you're cutting shipbuilding in half and saying, well, we're going to make it up in reconciliation. Are we going to have reconciliation every year, which basically, by the way, puts a significant part, 10 or 15% of the defense budget in a wholly partisan decision-making process, whereas in the history of this committee, it's always been bipartisan. Why are we doing it this way?
Senator King is putting the spotlight on one of Washington's dirtiest little secrets, how the defense budget gets sliced and diced behind closed doors. By questioning the decision to split the defense budget into two parts, King is demanding what every taxpayer deserves: transparency. Because let's face it, when budgets get murky, so does accountability. King's concern is clear. Partisan-driven cuts are threatening to carve out 10 to 15% of the defense budget without real debate or justification. That's not fiscal responsibility. That's political sabotage dressed up as strategy. We're talking about potential gaps in national security, troop readiness, and critical programs, all because some lawmakers want to play games with the bottom line. King is asking the right question. If these cuts are so defensible, why hide them in the shadows? This isn't about left versus right. It's about whether we value a defense budget based on real needs or political optics.
Senator, from our view, the budget number 961 meets the requirements and threats that we face. And
that's not the number. The number is 892.6. You're adding reconciliation. That's my whole point. Why not give us a base budget of 961 or whatever the right number is, what you consider the right number, and then we can operate and make our decisions. Why do it in this bifurcated way that really is fooling the American people about what the defense budget is?
We're not trying to fool anybody, sir. It's two bills, one budget. We're working with OMB, and we feel very comfortable with the number of 961 billion.
Why don't you give us a straight-up budget for the Defense Department? That's my question.
Senator, this is a straight-up budget for the Defense Department, and it's a 13% increase over what Joe Biden gave us.
It is a two-part defense budget. Part of it is in reconciliation instead of in the budget that's being presented to this committee. This committee only has a partial review of the budget. I don't understand why we can't have an honest, straightforward budget instead of this son of Oko that you're putting over on us. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator King just cut through the notorious smokescreen and demanded something radical: honesty. In questioning Pete Hegseth about the Defense Department's split budget, King zeroed in on a tactic that too often lets Congress play shell games with trillions of taxpayer dollars. Instead of a straightforward, transparent base budget, we get a Frankenstein monster of numbers, mashed together with reconciling gimmicks that blur the real picture. King isn't buying it, and neither should we. By merging routine defense spending with reconciliation funding, leaders are able to sneak controversial cuts or hikes through the back door without real accountability. King's message is simple. If we're going to fund the most powerful military on earth, we need a budget that doesn't hide behind procedural tricks. This isn't just about fiscal discipline, it's about restoring integrity to the process. Because if the Pentagon's budget can't stand up to daylight, maybe it's time to rethink what we're defending. So what do you think? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. The next one is even more controversial. This isn't about left versus right. It's about whether we value a defense budget based on real needs or political optics.